I'm told we have one of tonight's moderators, and I'm told further she is Rachel Maddow. Job well done. It's always unfair to be moderator of these things because then people like us ask people like you, how did it feel to be out there? How did it feel to be out there?
I have no feeling of any kind, and I expect that I won't for several weeks. This was absolutely freaking terrifying. It was, I mean, as you know, moderating the debate is always really hard. Moderating a 10-way debate 2 nights in a row is not a thing that humans can do, and we should never try it again.
Let me ask. Politically, who seemed to own the night, if the night indeed had one owner?
I think I'm not in a great frame of mind yet to
Good answer.
tell you who did well. You know, yeah, it's just because, you know, like when we're setting these things up, I mean, obviously we're studiously neutral between the candidates. We're trying not to give anybody a particularly hard time or a particularly easy time, trying to make sure that everybody gets on stage and that the most important stuff gets litigated. I mean, I have a binder full of questions and topics that we didn't get through because a lot of stuff tonight needed to breathe because the candidates took it upon themselves to mix it up among themselves in ways that, you know, we anticipated in the abstract, but you never know what's going to happen in that moment. And so, I mean, it may have been inevitable because they saw how things went the first night, what it's like to have 10 candidates on stage and, you know, and how you can play things to your advantage. I think the second night candidates knew how they wanted to approach this in terms of going at each other and really taking Chuck and I out of the mix as much as they could in a lot of ways. So I think I'm still a little shocked by it, but I will say that I don't think anybody on that stage didn't seem like they should be there. I didn't think anybody on that stage embarrassed themselves. I mean, obviously not all of those people can be front runners, not even close. But nobody, I don't think, on that stage is going to walk away and say, oh, I really screwed up or I embarrassed myself or maybe this should be the end for me. It wasn't that sort of a night. I thought they all performed.
Rachel, first of all, you guys did a masterful job at letting the candidates own the night and almost not disappearing in a submissive way, but disappearing in a way that they shaped the night and they shaped the conversation. Yeah. And I imagine that was your intention. But you talked about the binders. I mean, you guys were so well prepared. And I wonder if you could just sort of kind of tick through a couple of the specific policies that you were probing and just sort of share some reflections about whose answers surprised you or whose answers weren't what you expected, or whose answers maybe turned the conversation in a way you weren't expecting?
Well, one of the things that I thought was an interesting dynamic was some of the different cross currents that were picked up on guns, right? Congressman Swalwell is a young congressman. He does not have a huge national profile. He is on the Intelligence Committee. He's very articulate. People know him on cable news, I think, a lot for his commentary on things that come before the Intelligence Committee and the Mueller report. But he really has taken on this guns issue in a way that is earnest and deep. And for him to be proposing that buyback program and then, as you say, taking it out of mine and Chuck's hands and challenging Senator Sanders and saying, yeah, Senator Sanders, you're talking about all the things you want to do on guns, but you'll leave these guns on the street. Why not buy them back? Why not buy them back? Similarly, Congressman Swalwell going to Mayor Pete Buttigieg on the issue of an officer-involved shooting, saying you should fire the chief if somebody wasn't wearing that body cam. I mean, those are two moments that happen to be Congressman Swalwell. I'm not suggesting he was the guy who mastered that dynamic, but I think that was the kind of thing where they know each other's records and they have critique ready for each other. I don't think this is a gloves off primary anymore, and I think that it's on substance. It's not ad hominem, and I think that everybody's capable of defending themselves, and I think that's good.
I think that for us watching, the whole room changed when Kamala Harris took on Vice President Biden on the issue of busing and put herself in the story and really did what some people have talked about doing, but no one had done. It felt different watching. Did it feel different moderating?
Yes, that was one of those things where, you know, you feel the weather shift. Yeah. And, you know, and again, we started on racial issues. We knew that the issue of Vice President Biden's recent comments were going to come up. We were prepared with what Senator Harris had said to the press previously in response to those questions. We were prepared on all of their record in terms of race, not only contemporaneously, but in the past. And all of them have some interesting evolutions on racial issues, or at least most of them do. But for Senator Harris to herself take it upon the issue take it upon herself to raise the issue of his comments about the segregationist senators, and then to prosecute the case against him, and I think that's how she put it, on busing, and to have Vice President Biden explain himself on busing in a way that neither of them was backing down, and she did it with such emotion. I mean, that was a moment that, I mean, anytime you're preparing for a debate, that's the moment that you want. But in this case, it had nothing to do with us. That was the candidates bringing that themselves, and it was magic in the moment.
Hey there, I'm Chris Hayes from MSNBC. Thanks for watching MSNBC on YouTube. If you want to keep up to date with the videos we're putting out, you can click subscribe just below me, or click over on this list to see lots of other great videos.